Hey there, welcome back to another review, this time of the 1989 film, The Return of Swamp Thing. Now, this is a guilty pleasure of mine. I'm not gonna defend this as a good movie, because it isn't. It's a bad film. It's a bad movie, but that's the point. It's a B movie. Jim Wynorski doesn't make a lot of great films. The only really great film I can think of that, off the top of my head, that he did was Chopping Mall. This is my second favorite film he's directed. I actually prefer this to Swamp Thing with Wes Craven because I just have more fun with the whole campy, tongue-in-cheek aspect of the film. Now, this movie has its tongue so firmly embedded in its left cheek that it's poking out the other side. I mean, it's that. I mean, just look at the cover art. Heather Locklear is mugging for the camera. I mean, this is totally not meant to be taken seriously. This is the type of movie you sit back and relax with some brewskis and some potato chips and just veg out, really. This is a film that I have fond memories of, watching it as a kid, watching with my dad. My dad actually bought this for me. I remember when he bought it for me. He bought it for me at Borders, which is a company that no longer exists because they sold books and they also sold music and movies. But they also sold movies for like way too expensive prices. But this was cheap. This wasn't really that expensive. And I'm glad I got it then because this image release is out of print now. This particular release of the film is out of print. And this release has a commentary with Jim Wynorski on it, the trailer, some TV spots, and public service announcement. Yeah, public service announcement with Swamp Thing that I guess did air on TV in certain markets, which is pretty strange to say the least. Um, but yeah, I've always had fun with this movie. I enjoy it for what it is. It's a bad film, but it's entertaining. It's fun to watch. It's a good old fashioned fun monster basher. It's just guys in suits punching other guys in suits. It's the same. I get the same sort of entertainment out of this film as I do with a Godzilla movie from back in the day, where Godzilla is fighting all these other monsters, and those movies are pretty silly and campy too, and this is definitely pretty silly and campy. But I gotta be honest, nothing puts a smile on my face faster than seeing Swamp Thing punch people in the face, hit them with bats, and blow people up with grenades. This is my Toxic Avenger. I would prefer this film over Toxic Avenger or any of the Toxic Avenger films any day of the week. Anyway, Return of Swamp Thing is a sequel to Wes Craven's Swamp Thing, and it was released in 1989. It barely got any theatrical, uh, it barely got a release, really. It was released in a few theaters. It only made like a hundred and something $1,000. It only made like $192,000 and 800. Yeah, $192,816. That's all it made. It didn't even make $193,000. It was a really low budget film, but they managed to do a lot with the low budget. You had some really great makeup effects. This is the best Swamp Thing has looked, in my opinion, is in this movie. The effects were great. They still look great to this day. You had, I think it was, yeah, some really impressive special effects, I thought, by the crew. And I'm just gonna look it up real quick to make sure who did the special effects, so I give them the right credit that they deserve for doing the special effects for the movie, because they really did a great job with the makeup effects. For a low budget, you had a lot of different creatures and monsters, which this was actually a lower budgeted film than Wes Craven's Swamp Thing, and it has more monsters in it. And it has a leech monster in the beginning, which is a really effective looking creature. You have, of course, Swamp Thing looks a lot better. Um, yeah, Carl Fullerton, who did created the makeup for Swamp Thing. Carl Fullerton's done a lot of makeup for a lot of other stuff. I mean, he worked on Silence of the Lambs. He's been working lately. He did Return of Swamp Thing. He did visual effects for Warlock. He did the makeup effects for Remo Williams. He's the guy who was responsible for making Joel Grey into the Asian character. So he was responsible for creating that makeup that I think he was nominated for an Oscar for. And Dean Gates also helped do some of the other makeup, creature effects, and so forth and so on. So yeah, they all did. The whole crew did an amazing job. Steve Neal, who was a special makeup effects artist, he's done a lot of other makeup effects. He's worked on Ghostbusters. He's worked on Star Trek 6. He's worked on Fright Night. So he also helped work with. He was a special effects makeup artist for the film. Um, so yeah, Todd Masters and company, they ended up doing the Arcane Lab Mutants. So Todd Masters is a very accomplished, effective special effects artist. He worked on makeup effects for movies like Howling 6, The Freaks. He also did effects for Tales from the Crypt Demon Knight. He helped do effects for that. He worked on Tales from the Crypt. So he did a lot of stuff for Tales from the Crypt. So yeah, Tom Masters is really talented makeup effects artist. So I just wanted to make sure to give those guys their proper due because they definitely do deserve it because they did a great job with such a low budget creating all these different monsters and all these different creatures for the film. You have the Leech monster, you have the Arcane Lab mutants, one guy's a half lizard, half human. You have another one who's like half elephant. You have another one that's like a cockroach man, which is actually a really effective looking makeup effect. You see it for a little bit, but it's still an effective effect. You have the pituitary gland monster where Dr. Rochelle's turned into this big giant guy with this big Hulk head. Reminded me a lot of the leader from Incredible Hulk films. The Incredible Hulk comics, really. In the cartoon. The leader never was really in the films. He was going to be the villain in Incredible Hulk, like a sequel to Incredible Hulk, but there never was a sequel to Incredible Hulk. So, it's the closest you're going to get to seeing the leader on the screen. And so yeah, I just wanted to make sure to mention the special effects because that's a real standout. Even the visual effects with a little bit of the explosions and a little bit of the visuals of like the lightning and Swamp Thing's energy and so forth was actually pretty effective looking for such a low budget. The film is produced by the same guys who produced Wes Craven's Swamp Thing, Benjamin Melinda Kerr and Michael E. Uslan, and it features a screenplay by Neil Cuthbert and Grant Morris. Now, the film has a novelization, and the first film has a novelization as well. But the second novelization, the novelization of Return of Swamp Thing, is really good. I highly recommend that to any Swamp Thing fans. It's written by Peter David, who's written a lot of comics for DC and Marvel, and he changed a lot of things up in the comic, and he basically went and ran with the concept. Peter David's novel, Return of Swamp Thing, is what the film would be like if it had a budget. So if it had an unlimited amount of money to work with, that's what the movie would be if they followed Peter David's novel. So I do highly recommend that book. If you can find it for any fans of Swamp Thing, definitely recommend it. Highly recommend it. And I also highly recommend it to anyone who's a fan of this movie. Because you get to read and put images in your head of a almost completely different movie than Return of Swamp Thing. I mean, there's a lot of the same sort of similar plot elements, but there's so much more effects. There's so much more monsters. There's so much more moments with the Swamp Thing using his powers. Like I remember a scene where I was reading it, where the scene in the film I still think is a fun little monster basher sequence where Swamp Thing's beating up the Leech Man and hitting cars and blowing up all these cars and stuff like that. But in the book, Swamp Thing is even more in depth. Swamp Thing ends up cloning himself multiple times, and multiple Swamp Things attack the Leech Man, and so it's definitely it's definitely worth a read. I don't even want to give it away. I really think you really need to seek it out if you're a big fan of Swamp Thing and you're a fan of this movie, and even if you're not a fan of this movie, if you find it somewhere at a used bookstore or at a thrift store somewhere, I highly recommend you pick it up because it's a really good read. But anyway, just had to throw that out there. And this film stars Louise Jordan, who returns as Arcane. Now, I know some people are like, how did he live? How did he survive? He was killed at the end of the first movie. Well, the film explains it. I know some people are saying it didn't explain it. It did. It really does. It explains how he survived. Dr. Rochelle, one of his colleagues that he's working with in this film, he reveals that he found Arcane when he was in his creature form, and then he and some other colleagues they rescued him from the swamp, and then they brought him back to health. And now he's rapidly aging, so that's why they need to get a formula in order to keep him alive. So that's why they're creating all these mutants, and that's why they're doing all this other stuff, and that's why they need Heather Locklear, because she's got a DNA code the perfect DNA code that'll help create the formula for immortality that Louis Jourdan's character Arcane needs to survive. Of course, they also need a little bit of Swamp Thing's DNA as well. So they explain it rather easily. I mean, they explain it in the film. I don't get this criticism that some people have where it's not explained. It is explained. And it's not as far-fetched to me as, for example, bringing back Durant in Darkman 2. Here, it's like, he was a monster. He wasn't necessarily human. I mean, the Swamp Thing could get his arm cut off and grow it back, or he could get blown up with a grenade launcher, like in this movie, and then form back into his body. I think that Arcane could do the same. He's no longer human after he takes the formula, so I think he should be able to also regenerate, just like Swamp Thing does. So I don't really see that as anything that's really that far-fetched. And I'm honestly glad Louis Jourdan returned, because he's having he's just, I love this performance. It's one of the few performances where you have an actor who's obviously just taking the role for a paycheck, but he makes it great regardless. It's Louis Jourdan's performance in this is thug life. Deal with it. That's what it is. Just deal with it. I don't give a shit. You're just gonna have to deal with it. And it's just really entertaining to see Louis Jourdan just be all thug life throughout the entire movie. Heather Locklear is also in this. She's nice to look at, but she's not a good actress, and I definitely would have to say that she did deserve her Razzie Award for Worst Actress for her performance in the film. Now, she has some fun few lines of dialogue, like where she's talking about her vasectomy, for instance, when she's talking to Gunn, played by Joey Sagal, the security expert for Louis Jourdan. And Gunn's a character I do enjoy, played by Joey Sagal. I think he's a very fun character. He's definitely having fun with his role. I mean, he has some fun lines of dialogue. He's going after Swamp Thing, and he's like, "Let's turn him into guacamole!" The guy's just absolutely over the top, and just, I couldn't help but enjoy the performance. It was a lot of fun, for me personally. It's like, "I'm gonna get you, Mr. Potato Head!" No, so I did have fun with him. And the scene where he's comparing scars with his colleague, who points, who, this actress, there's a little bit of sort of controversy regarding this actress her character being called Points in the film, because she was originally called Points because because Jim Wynorski was calling her that because of her pointy nipples, and he wanted Louis Jourdan to call her Points, and because of her pointy nipples, and Louis Jourdan was offended by that, and then Jim Wynorski calls out Louis Jourdan, and he's all like, "Weren't you on a film called Octopussy?" and then Louis Jourdan refused to talk to Jim Wynorski for the rest of the film. Which I thought that was pretty funny. It's just like, "I'm not talking to you anymore." So, yeah, I had this actor, she's called Points, and she has a fun scene where she compares scars with Joey Sagal's character. You also have some fun bits, a fun scene where Joey Sagal, his gun, goes up against Swamp Thing at the end. He comes up with a chainsaw, and I have some fun with that sequence as well. And Swamp Thing blows him up with a grenade, which is pretty awesome. And then you have, of course, speaking of Swamp Thing himself, Dick Durock returns as Swamp Thing. And Dick Durock does a great job. He has more movement. He has more ability to move and use his size and and do more with the makeup effects that he had, the suit that he has on in this film. And it doesn't just look like a suit. It looks like a really effective looking creature outfit. It looks like Swamp Thing. It's the first time, because before in the 1982 film, it looked like a melted army man with like mines on it. It really wasn't that effective looking. And you could tell that it was a suit. Here it's really effective. And it's really a testament to the craft and the handiwork of the makeup effects team of Carl Fullerton and company. And Swamp Thing is just so much fun. I know he's dubbed in this. What's funny is Jim Wynorski and Dick Durock did not know that Swamp Thing was dubbed in this movie until after the movie was finished. And then they're like, wait a second, why? And Dick Durock's like, why is my voice dubbed? And then, of course, Jim Wynorski's like, I don't know. And I just thought that was kind of funny. It's like they didn't know, he didn't know either. But I didn't mind the dubbing. It's one of the few instances of voice dubbing that I don't think is really that bad. Swamp Thing has some fun moments where he just, I mean, just a lot of fun. He just shows up and just beats the shit out of people. I mean, there's a moment there in the beginning. There's this guy who's trying to go on a hunt. He's with his coworkers, trying to find a still, which is trying to find some moonshine in the swamp somewhere. They encounter the Leech Man. Leech Man fucks up some of the coworkers, and other guys try to get away, but they get shot by Points and the rest of the Arcane security team. And then this one guy, he thinks he's found, he loses his glasses because he falls and trips. Then he sees a Leech Man, which is a really freaky looking effect. And then Swamp Thing comes in and then saves him. And then he's like, "Thank you, man. You saved my life. I mean, what can I call you?" Then Swamp Thing gives him his glasses. He puts them back on. He's like freaked out, and he's like, "You can call me Swamp Thing." And then the opening credits show up, you know, the return of Swamp Thing. And then I just have to, before I even go into more fun scenes with Swamp Thing and Dick Durock, I would be totally remiss in this review if I did not mention the badass opening credits. So you have the intro with the Leech Man in the swamp. And Swamp Thing beats up the Leech Man for a little bit, sends him running, tells the guy who he is. Boom, here comes the titles, and then here comes this one of the most badass opening credits I've ever seen in a superhero film. Just all these different comic book panels from Swamp Thing comics set to CCR's Born on the Bayou. And it's just, it fits like a glove. It gives me chills every time I see that sequence. I love it. And I will always associate CCR's Born on the Bayou with this film and with Swamp Thing. I know a good friend of mine will associate Born on the Bayou with Hard Target, but I didn't grow up with Hard Target, and I didn't really know CCR's Born on the Bayou was in Hard Target until I saw it for the first time, which is like a few years ago. This, though, I grew up watching this movie. This is a DVD I've had since I was really young. So this is one of the few DVDs that I have in my collection that I've had from the very beginning, like when I first started collecting DVDs. And I always remember that scene, that intro with the comic book panels and Born in the Bayou, and it just fits the film. It fits the character like a glove. It just, you could have called the song Swamp Thing, and there wouldn't be any complaints because it fits Swamp Thing. It really does. So yeah, that is such an awesome intro. And so then and then Swamp Thing himself is awesome. Swamp Thing himself is what makes this film for me. The sequences he's in are fun. He's punching people in the face. There's a scene where he encounters these hillbilly guys who's trying to maybe rape and Heather Locklear. He comes in and beats their ass. And one guy's like, "Turn him into I'm gonna turn you into coleslaw." And he's got like a knife. Swamp Thing just beats his ass real fast. And of course the scene where he fights the Leech Man and blows up all these cars and they lift up these pipes and they start clanging them. They fight with the pipes, and it's raining outside. So when they collide, lightning strikes them, and then they get all electrified. And then Swamp Thing ducks underneath a pipe swing, and the Leech Man hits a propane tank, and just boom, practical explosions. Just the whole fucking place just blows up the sky high, just explodes. And I love the scene with the two, and of course before that you had the fun scenes with the two kids, who they're not the best actors in the world. I gotta be absolutely honest. These kids, they're not necessarily Oscar-winning actors. RonReaco Lee, who plays Omar, and Daniel Emery Taylor is Daryl. I mean, RonReaco Lee is better than Daniel Emery Taylor, who's fucking atrocious, and he's annoying. It's this fat kid who's all like, it's really obnoxious. It's one thing about this movie I don't like, is that kid. But I do like the scene where he goes in, and he meets up with Omar at his place, and they could start looking at nudie magazines. They start looking at porno mags, and then of course they hear a knock on the door. It's, holy shit, it's my mom! Put him away! Put him away! And of course then they open the door. It's the Leech Man, and I always crack up at their reaction where they slam the door real quick, and then they look at each other, and then they scream. And then, of course, then they go outside. The Leech Man, they escape. They throw a bowling ball through the window, and Daniel Emery Taylor's like, Daryl's like, hey, that's my dad's bowling ball. Actually, it's Omar who's like, hey, my dad's bowling ball. That throws it out the window, and they get out of the place. And then Leech Man is chasing after him. Then Swamp Thing shows up, and then they scream at Swamp Thing, and then Swamp Thing kicks Leech Man's ass, and then gets lit on fire. And it's just like the first film. It actually is guys in fire suits, actually lit on fire, stuntmen, and jumps in the river. And you have more fun where Swamp Thing messes up the security guys, beats up on the security guys of Norcane's group. He gets blown up with a grenade launcher, but then what's left of him, which looks like a swampy blob, so to speak, just slithers into the piping, and then comes out of the faucet in the bathtub. Comes out of the bathtub while Sarah Douglas, who it's really nice to see her in this. She does a good job performance-wise. Sarah Douglas. You might remember her as Ursa from Superman 2. And I definitely would say this is a better sequel than Beastmaster 2. That's not saying much, but she plays Dr. Lana Zarel. And so she's about ready to take a bath or a shower, and Swamp Thing what's left of him comes out of the faucet in the bathtub, and then he regenerates, and then kicks a bunch of guys, kicks some more ass, punches out some more guys, the security team, gets in a car, gets in a Jeep, Heather Locklear shooting a shotgun out the back, and it's good fun. And then I really like I have a lot of fun with the scene where he ends up, because Heather Locklear gets kidnapped after he beats up on Gunn and his men again, because they take the kids, and I like this scene where Gunn takes the camera away from Omar, which the camera is actually it actually belongs to Daryl's dad. He takes it away from him. And he's all like, and Omar's like, are you gonna let us go now? Right? And Gunn's like, wrong. And then Swamp Thing shows up and just punches him right in the face. Swamp Thing shows up and says, right. And then just punches him right in the face. And then grabs the bat and just starts fucking going to town and just kicking their asses with his baseball bat. I just have a lot of fun with that scene. And then you have the climax where he beats up on. You have the Dr. Rochelle shows up as a mutant who looks like a leader with a big head, but he gets his ass kicked in like 10 seconds. One of the most anticlimactic final battles you will ever see, but it ends up working for the film because the film is one of those, fuck it, we're not making Oscar-worthy material here. We're just making a Swamp Thing film. It's like a live-action cartoon in a lot of ways. It's like an episode of Toxic Crusaders or that 1991 Swamp Thing animated series. Swamp Thing, even before he fought the guy, anticlimactic fight, he goes in, he fights some more of the, he he basically sneaks into the compound, and I have fun. I just have so much fun watching Swamp Thing just sneak up and punch people in the face. Just shows up and he taps this guy on the shoulders like, got a light? Boom! Sucker punches him. Then grabs and then he just grabs a grenade and he's like, this is too easy. So, yeah, so I have a lot of fun with the scenes of Swamp Thing. Um, One scene I don't have that much fun dealing with Swamp Thing is the weird sex scene with Swamp Thing and Abby Arcane, played by Heather Locklear. I don't know what the hell that was about. He gives her some hallucinogenic plant, and then she hallucinates that she's making out with Dick Durock. Dick Durock, and I don't know. I really, I can't defend that. I can't. I really can't defend that. That's indefensible. I can't do it. But yeah, Swamp Thing is himself is what makes this movie so much fun. Um, Also, it's a really fast-paced movie. It's about an hour, and it says it's 88 minutes. Without the end credits, it's like an hour and 24 minutes. It goes by really quick. It's not, I don't think it's ever really boring. I think it's definitely a film that keeps your interest and keeps you entertained, if it's your idea of entertainment. It's like, if it's that, like I said, it's a B movie. It's a movie that's made with the intention that it's not meant to be a good movie. It's not meant to be a great film. It's a B movie. It's a film that is in on the joke. It's making a bad movie. They're making a bad movie. That's what it is. It's a campy, over the top, silly camp fest. That's really what it is. But in a lot of ways, I think it's a little bit underrated because for what it is, it's one of the better B movies I've seen because it's just consistently entertaining. It's it's a lot of fun to watch. You got fun sequences with Swamp Thing. It's got some decent action set pieces for such a low budget. The effects are great, especially the makeup special effects. And it even has a good score. I mean, I thought I think it's Chuck Cirino. Chuck Sereno did a good job with the score. I always remember the little main theme that you hear when Swamp Thing shows up, where it's like da 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 da. I always remember that because, of course, I saw the film a lot when I was a kid growing up, but I always remember that because it sounded very heroic theme, and I like the theme, and it's more memorable than the main theme they had for Swamp Thing, the Wes Craven film. And this felt more like a Swamp Thing film to me than Wes Craven's film did. Wes Craven's film had its moments, but some of the most fun I had with Swamp Thing were the moments where it was having the fun with the campiness. And here, Return of the Swamp Thing just turns that up to 11, and it's actually really enjoyable, because it ends up going that far with the camp. Um, but it's not a film for everybody. Like I said, it's a guilty pleasure. I'm not gonna go in and say, "Oh man, this is the greatest movie of all time," or "This is an epic, great a piece of celluloid." No, it isn't. But for what it is, you could do a lot worse. It could be a lot worse than it is. Um, but yeah, I think the film has a lot of pros for me personally. I think Swamp Thing himself is a pro. Dick Durock does a great job. The guy who did the voice dubbing did a solid job. Uh, some of the lines of dialogue were fun. Some fun bits of jokes. I mean, Heather Locklear makes a reference to T.J. Hooker in one line. You have it's absurd, it's crazy, it was strange. I mean, stuff like Heather Locklear talking to plants, and then she makes out with Swamp Thing later, and yeah, really out there, crazy stuff, zaniness. It's like if you like something like Return of the Killer Tomatoes or things like that, or and those type of campy movies, or Howard the Duck, I think you'll definitely get a kick out of Return of Swamp Thing. Um, but like I said, it's not for everybody. But I still thought there were a lot of pros for me personally. Dick Durock, Swamp Thing, Some of the writing, I liked Arcane's performance, Louis Jordan's I don't give a shit performance. Sarah Douglas did a good job of what she had to work with. I like the guy, Dr. Rochelle. The Ace Mask, which is a crazy name. Ace Mask sounds like is a really badass name. And when you see the guy whose name is Ace Mask, you're like, wow, I did not expect that face to go along with that name. Then you have Joey Sagal, had a lot of fun as Gunn, the security detail expert guy, and yeah, and the visual effects and the score, the editing for the most part is pretty good for such a low budget flick. Direction by Jim Wynorski is definitely one of his better efforts, and because there are some certain sequences that definitely do look like he had the best bang for his buck, so to speak. He actually also did a good job shooting the sequences that were supposed to look ethereal and beautiful, with the whole sequences during where you see Swamp Thing in his lair, and then the infamous swamp sex scene with Swampy and Abby. And last but not least, those makeup effects, which are top notch. But yeah, I mean, if there's any cons, I would have to say the stuff with the kid. There's some stuff that some stuff with Heather Locklear is just really cringe-inducing to watch. Her performance, especially. The stuff with the kids, I'm fine with it in the sequence where they're in their trailer, they're in the trailer home area, and then you have the fight between the Leech Man. But I don't think we needed more. I don't think we needed the kids going out on their own in the swamp, trying to find Swamp Thing to get a picture. I don't think we really needed that. You could have had him in there for a little bit, so then you have the scene where uh, Swamp Thing beats the shit out of the guys with the bat that Daryl had. But that's all you really needed. Um, and you don't need the sequence in the middle of the end credits where basically we find out they forgot to put film in the camera, and Daryl's about to get his ass kicked by his friend. So you didn't really need that either. I mean, that's kind of like we didn't really need Omar gonna fight Daryl at the end. It really wasn't necessary. So I would have cut their scenes down considerably. And but yeah, for a B movie, you could do a lot worse. I mean, I've seen Asylum films on the Sci-Fi Channel that are 10 times worse than this. Man Thing. That's a piece of shit. This is not a great movie, but it's not trying to be. And it ends up being really entertaining despite the fact that it has such a low budget and it's in on the joke, and it's basically just making like I said, it's making a live action cartoon. It's like the whole film is like, I don't give a fuck, deal with it. And you either enjoy it or you don't. It's one of those films I think you either love it or you hate it. And I do really enjoy this film, but I can't, as an entertainment factor, it gets a thumbs up from me. Um, but as a film, I can't honestly give it two thumbs up. I can't do that. I know Roger Ebert liked the film, but Gene Siskel didn't care for it at all. But yeah, I really don't know what to say about the Return of Swamp Thing, except I was a rate out of 5 stars. I'd give the film 3.5. I think it's an above average film, mainly because Dick Durock as Swamp Thing is so cool. I have so much fun with him punching people, punching monsters, beating people up with baseball bats, blowing people up with grenades. I have fun with some of the lines of dialogue. Especially, I really do like the line that Arcane has, where Heather Locklear is like, "What'd you do? Sell your soul to the devil?" Let's just say he has a lease with an option to buy. So it's that type of movie. I mean, it's like Flash Gordon, the 1980 film directed by Mike Hodges with Sam J. Jones. It's that type of campy, pulpy B movie, and you either like that kind of thing or you don't. And I've always enjoyed that kind of stuff. I mean, I really enjoy Howard the Duck. I like this movie. I can watch King Kong Lives and enjoy it for what it is. Yes, there's some cringe-inducing moments, but I'm still entertained by the film regardless. That's another guilty pleasure of mine. So yeah, it's definitely a film that is not everyone going to be everyone's personal taste, so to speak. But yeah, if you like that type of movie, if you like Toxic Avenger, you like Flash Gordon, you like Howard the Duck, you like those type of campy B movies, I do recommend Return of Swamp Thing if you haven't seen it already. But anyway, yeah, I really don't know what else to say except thank you for watching my review of the Return of Swamp Thing. And I will see you guys later. See ya.